Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Hey folks, how are you this week? Let's get right to it today. Principal Chief James Floyd was on the Muskogee radio station this week with Gary Fife, and here is that interview with Chief Floyd.
SJ, welcome to Muskogee Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. This morning we're going to be enjoying a nice chat with our Principal Chief, James Floyd, who's graciously made time in his schedule to come down and talk to us. We're going to see how the tribe's been doing since his State of the Tribe Nation speech earlier this year, and kind of see what the progress is and chat about a couple of other important issues. So first of all, welcome, Chief. We appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Glad to be here.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we give you the first few minutes of this program to kind of give us a feel and overall concept of how the tribe is doing since last you addressed them like this.
Well, I think that we continue to progress and take advantage of opportunities that are before us. And I think that bodes well for the economy of the nation, the welfare of the people of the nation, and for our government. So we continue to work on a wide range of things. There's never seems to be a lack of things to be involved in. And so we continue to work and devote our efforts to that, geared toward just expanding the services and jobs and resources to the nation. So it keeps us very busy.
Well, let me toss a biggie at you, I guess, about the national scene. The president has come out with a new budget that looks like there are a lot of cuts to programs that are important to us. Interior's talking about changing the way things are done, land into trust kind of things. What do you see there as far as the federal government is concerned? Is it kind of a dangerous time for us? Is it tough, or are we going to have to do some belt tightening, or is there some daylight there?
Well, the budget was released earlier this week, and I've yet to really see all the details of it. I know some of the concepts and some of the objectives of the budget, and you're correct. The domestic program cuts are troubling to hear about. Fortunately, I think we have people who will defend that and defend those programs in Congress, and we will have the opportunity to go in and get our voices heard. I think it's also great that we can work with the Intertribal Council, the 5 civilized tribes, in developing positions, and the fact that cumulatively we represent more Indian population in the United States than anybody else. And so we want to use that to our advantage in talking about the benefits of continuing the programs to people in eastern Oklahoma, including the Muskogee Creek Nation. So we're going to be speaking about that here in the coming weeks. I know that on the House side there was a hearing last week. We didn't participate in that one, but it's preparatory for the appropriation hearings, and so we will at least have statements prepared for the record if we're not there in person to have testimony, to make sure that the things that we see important, whether it be elderly nutrition program, child care, education, health care, land into trust, those things we already have in place. They've been serving people for a long time. we can demonstrate what good they've been providing, and we'll make that known to everybody who's in Congress. So when they make the decisions as they consider the 2020 budget, we can hopefully turn things around and either restore or keep into place those programs that are vital to us.
Now, we do have a bit of daylight on the House side. We have 2 Native American women now who are members and heading up some important committees. But from my experience, the new congressperson is going to have a rough time getting stuff done until they build up some relationships and some deals and things like that. So, I know this wasn't on our list, but what do you think about having those 2 congresswomen up there now looking out for?
I think that benefits us very well. I've been able to meet with both of them. They're both from neighboring states of Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Kansas, where we have pretty large populations in Wichita and in Albuquerque. So they represent those areas. And so Muskogee Creek people are their constituents in their home states. But in their committee assignments, they will be dealing with Indian issues. And I think they recognize the importance of the Muskogee Creek Nation, and we will stay in touch with them. I think it was last month when I was in Washington that I was able to meet with both of them, and it wasn't the first time. So they're aware of us, they're aware of what we've done and the things that we would like to do. So I look forward to working with them on their different committees. They got their staff in place now, and I'm sure on my next trip up there I'll be meeting with the staff in extended conversations just to talk about the issues that is under consideration currently.
Have you had the chance to meet the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs?
I did before she was confirmed. I guess Tara Sweeney is one you're talking. Yes, I met her when she was making her rounds in Congress. We happened to be in the same congressional office at the same time, and so I've got to have a conversation with her. Found out we have some mutual friends, so that connection is helpful. And but she's inherited very tough responsibilities. You're aware. I mean that office is just full of hot button topics, and we'll see how she holds up to all those things.
Well, it was my impression when I looked at kind of the agenda that the president and his people had laid out, and then she has to come in and enforce it, so to speak. And some of those things are not very kind to tribal governments. So that's, you got to do that. Although you want to do the best for your own people, you still got to do what your job is. Okay, well, let's talk about local stuff here. Let me start with the SHIELD Act, of course, which is critical to yours truly and the rest of the staff of Muskogee Media. We've been kind of back and forth on the freedom of the press issue. We were really scared for a while, and then things have been worked out in meetings and consultations, and now a SHIELD Act is there to protect the media, or our reporters and people. So give me your...
Well, I think the last time we spoke, I felt optimistic that we could work something out, and we were kind of in the midst of, I guess, the discussions and negotiations about that outcome that would eventually be passed by the National Council. Today, I can say I feel comfortable with what we have. The SHIELD Act was there for several things. One, to provide independence, but to kind of insulate members of the media from, persuasion or involvement in your business, and to have you reveal your sources. We've insulated you so that you don't have to do that. There's protections in place so you can keep your sources confidential and be free from political interference, and to work independently, and to have that act in place. I believe provides a security for you and any of the media. It extends to radio, television, and the print media. And I think that's one thing that I felt very passionate about, make sure that's in place. And so we have that in place. We also wanted to make sure that that the media products were retained by media, and so we have that in place as well. It isn't set up as an independent agency, but it very much mimics what an independent agency would present. We have the editorial board authority again, and we're actively working on looking at individuals that could be recommended for those two of those positions. The third will be named by the other two, and that needs to be in place by May. So we're progressing in the kind of administration, I guess is to say, of the Media Act, and hopefully each one of you feel that and can go do your work like you should.
You mentioned the editorial board there. Now, just my own conjectures, if the concerned members of the council had met with that board and discussed their concerns, we could have avoided a lot of things. You say, well, you're doing too much negative stuff. And I said, well, we don't make the news, we just report it. And if we're getting a little too close to home, well, so be it. It's nothing that we're out on a grudge or anything like that. But if they'd had that discussion, you know, they could have, the board could have brought it back to us and said, well, they're saying that you guys are A, B, C, D. And we could have adjusted or, you know, conceded or whatever we needed to do to relieve their concerns. Will that board be used perhaps in that capacity?
As we go forward, I think when the board is in place, you know, the purpose of the board is to work with the staff of media in the daily decisions of editorial content or whatever you may have. They're there to support you. And we wanted them to be there in that capacity. I think in the past, the charge for them was too broad because it really gave them management issues, and these folks are, their expertise is, you know, very specific, and I think we've removed some of that responsibility for them, have them specific to the news and editorial content, and to be available to the staff of media anytime they want it. I think that from my perspective, and hopefully that of the council, we see the board as being similar to other boards that both the chief and the council work with, and we can have those meetings and talk about issues that they may raise or that we may have. And so, you know, I think that going forward, I feel optimistic that those conversations can occur.
Yeah, all right, let's get down to a couple more business-type questions. Maybe you could give our listeners an idea of the financial security of the tribe, the permanent fund and whatever revenues that we're dealing with. Are there big, huge liabilities we should be aware of?
Well, first of all, I think the financial viability of the nation is probably better than it's ever been. I feel pretty confident that it is. The permanent fund remains intact and is growing and has been protected from, you know, any loans to it. And my goal is to, you know, continue to grow the permanent fund and to not shoulder it or to take any resources from it, because it grows. You know, it draws interest, and we have revenues that continue to go into that fund so that it can grow. One thing that I've learned as the principal chief is the value of having a permanent fund in terms of economic development. We were in a meeting yesterday, and one which I attended with financial advisors, and when they look at the fact that we have a permanent fund and the size of that, it really separates us from a number of tribes across the United States. We don't have the largest one by any means, but the fact that we have one probably puts us in the top 5% of tribes in the United States. And the fact that we have hundreds of millions of dollars there, again, may not be the largest one, but we do have security there. I see my responsibility is to keep that security in place and make sure that that fund is managed in a way that it continues to grow. And I'm pleased to say that it has. And we kind of weathered the stock market issues from last fall, and we have good advisors and managers on that, and the investment board. So I think we're doing our due diligence on that. But the importance of it, beyond just having that money for our future, is what it provides in a message to financial advisors and lenders, because they look at that and say, you have this, it's not attached to anything. And so we become a low risk to a lender. And that having us be a low risk means low interest rates on money that we may borrow. And that puts us in a high category of, I guess, reliability in payment. We've got a good payment history on loans that we've had. And we're really a low debt tribe. We just have, the gaming facility in River Spirit that we're paying off, the hospital at Okemah, and the clinic at Eufaula, and the health department's making the payments on both of those. So we're not in any condition that would be a warning sign to any lender.
So there are, well, let me ask you, are there any financial concerns that maybe you're dealing with now or on the horizon?
I think the things that we're dealing with are the normal business management issues with any investment that we have, whether it be through MNBE or OneFire or gaming. We have either executive branch or National Council representatives or reports to the National Council, which I also will sit in on, which we can gauge the progress of things. Some of the investments that we have, there's ups and downs in those businesses that we've invested in. But I think at this point we have a better handle than I've seen on the viability of businesses. And so we may be, selling our interest in some businesses or increasing our presence in the businesses to make sure that they provide returns to us the way that we intended. Now, it takes time, takes effort to make sure that we're involved in the management of those companies, but we should be, because that's our investment. And those are the things that I think that maybe the public doesn't see, that consumes a lot of our time, is you need to be involved in the operation of those businesses because we chose to invest in them, and we need to be involved to make sure they return revenue to the nation as they were intended to.
Now, we have the new facilities opened, Eufaula, as you mentioned. There have been changes here, even in Okmulgee and Okemah. New programs being launched. I understand there's a major initiative dealing with opioids and things like that. So is our healthcare situation in good financial shape? And as far as feet on the ground, do we have enough people? I mean, is it all right?
Well, in terms of the resources, yes, I believe that it is. We get a monthly report from the health department. They're operating in the black. We're very pleased about that. We have, as you mentioned, the opioid issue, several things going on. We've got, we're involved in litigation. Muskogee Creek Nation is one of the, what they call bellwether tribes on that issue. And so if there's any settlement going to be made, we're going to be one of the first ones there to determine the tribal share. And I think that's significant for us. This month, we will also be having our first pain management opioid conference at River Spirit, and people from probably throughout the nation, United States, and within Muskogee Creek Nation are invited to attend to begin to educate about the opioid crisis, the different dimensions of it, whether it's in our own home, our own family, or whether it's in the community or the Creek Nation as a whole. And so we can be better informed of our individual power, I guess, in trying to overcome this opioid crisis. It's a national crisis. And I think that we've been well represented on the national level in litigation. And I think that's very helpful to the nation as well.
I heard in the news this morning Johnson & Johnson's now on the hook for a lot of activities that are not quite on the up and up. So Is that a hopeful sign, I guess?
Well, there's a number of people that are involved, either the manufacturers, the wholesalers, the distributors, or even the local pharmacy or the national pharmaceutical chains. And those national chains are present here in Okmulgee and many towns throughout the Muskogee Creek Nation. There's one court that's overseeing all the litigation from the state of Oklahoma, Muskogee Creek Nation, and tribes, and individuals. And that's, I believe, in Cleveland. And so I believe the judge there is looking at trying to get some out-of-court settlement, or we're going to have some massive trial that occurs with possibly hundreds of individual defendants. So I think that to avoid a trial, there may be a settlement, and these individuals will be coming to the table, and that's when the benefit of us being one of the early litigators on the opioid crisis will help us, because we will be there to and be represented when the determination is made of, we've well documented our adverse outcomes and the impact that's had on Muskogee people. I feel very confident about the data that we have there, so when the decision's made, we'll be well prepared.
I've experienced action with the health department where they called you in to do a medical management test or review, just to see if our people are getting hooked on tramadol or whatever else. So that's encouraging. Get you half a day off from work too. Let's move on now. The Stigler Act, a lot of people saw that as a wonderful evolution. Is it in place now? What are the, direct benefits to Muskogee people?
Well, this morning I had my weekly meeting with my realty staff, and we continue to have Stigler Act outreach events. I think we have the next one tomorrow, I believe, in Cromwell, which the realty staff goes out and is able to communicate to community members what the act means, and then have the time to answer questions and work on individual cases. The Stigler Act, we're very pleased that it got passed, was signed into law. It removed the blood quantum requirement, which was 1/2 for the 5 civilized tribes, to inherit restricted land. And so now, in addition to that, the law provided for, freer access of information and a better definition of the land for economic development, right-of-way protections and management, and those things, we'll see the outcome of that probably within the next couple years, if not before that. But by having restricted land identified, its ownership determined, and knowing that there's the ability to transfer that from one generation to the next from now on, I think is very significant. So if somebody had restricted land that had good potential for economic development, the family now can determine if they want to enter into a long-term agreement with a business, and that can be placed on their land, and that they receive the benefits from it. So it's not just the oil and gas lease or the surface lease. There's other opportunities that can be provided to the tribal member. And I think that's significant because it provides additional resources, not to the nation, but to the individual or the individuals that have an interest in that restricted land.
Well, I certainly do. And those revenues have paid off a few bills for me, so I appreciate them being there and that good, solid future there. Let's talk about one more subject here, and then we'll take a break. Sovereignty. Now, we've heard the term being kicked around all kinds of places, and people wondering how are we going to butt heads with the states, companies, and the feds, particularly when we have an administration that it isn't particularly supportive. And a couple things come to mind, the Murphy case, where we could end up with jurisdiction over a huge chunk of Oklahoma, and VAWA. Now that we've had some action taken there. So where does that leave us as far as the overriding subject of sovereignty? Does it strengthen it? Does it give a demonstration of what we are? What do you think?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think understanding of what sovereignty means and how it's applied in different situations. We know that the Murphy case, to give an update about that very quickly, is, it's pending a decision by the Supreme Court. But we need to also focus on what it is and what it isn't, and communicate what it is and what it isn't. And our folks have been doing that. We've been reserved in our comments because it is, still pending, and our folks have been very cautious in getting statements out. But, that is a criminal matter, capital criminal case. The thing that's most important about that, I think for us, is that the 1866 treaty and the reservation boundaries of the Muskogee Creek Nation were never diminished. Now, should the ruling come out in our favor, I don't think it's going to be, an overnight, suddenly the Muskogee Creek Nation has jurisdiction on everything, because it's a criminal case. So we would then look at things such as VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. We've exercised our sovereignty in the prosecution of non-Indians and their violence against Indian women within the boundaries of the Muskogee Creek Nation. We'll continue to do that. As they file the police reports, and the Light Horse have been educated about that, they'll prepare that case, give it to the Attorney General's office. They'll be in court, they'll be prosecuted, and our women will be safer. And that's what our objective is. In a sense, that's sovereignty as well. In dealings with the state of Oklahoma, I think it's a relationship and communication that we need to make sure that we continually communicate with them and be involved with them, and that they understand what sovereignty is and isn't as well. And I think that with the new administration in the state, we have opportunities. The Attorney General's been up there recently, meeting with the state Attorney General and the other general counsels of the 4 tribes. And so, our folks are doing their work, and we'll continue to identify where we both exercise and defend our sovereignty on any issue.
Principal Chief James Floyd, we want to thank you for taking this time from this incredible schedule you have, and filling us in, bringing us up to date, and helping us out here. So we appreciate you.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. We'll say hello to everybody. Thanks for listening and for being on the show today. Hello.
Giajatas.
And that interview was cut down from an hour, so Chief Floyd spent a lot of time talking about a lot of things with Gary there. The entirety of that interview is on our YouTube channel. We'll see you guys next week. Have a great one.